Good morning. This is an open meeting of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on December 18th, 2024. And I want to welcome members of the public who are listening into this live meeting. Today, the Commission will consider one matter. This matter is whether to approve a final budget for 2025 and something called an accounting support fee for the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. And I look forward to discussing both of these matters. Just to put this a little bit in context and size and scope and so forth, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Boards has submitted a budget for next year of just under $400 million, and this would involve no increase in headcount to this agency. I support it because I think it's an important bit of ensuring and protecting investors and facilitating capital formation, and it's the role the PCAOB has in doing so. Look, a well-functioning financial markets are built on trust, and critical to such trust are disclosures, including financial statement disclosures made by issuers, those public companies that so many people invest in, and also the financial statement disclosures of broker-dealers. Nearly 25 years ago, though, this system of disclosure and trust broke down. Actually, I think would have been 23 years ago this December, when the fraud in financial reporting and accounting eventually led to the historic bankruptcy of first Enron in December of 2001, later WorldCom, and a series of other companies for over those next 6 months. I've often quoted my grandfather in moments like this, and I'll do it again, I guess, but my grandpa, Ellis Tillis, I'm told, would also often repeat a line that figures don't lie, but liars sure can figure. I think he understood it. Investors need facts. He wasn't talking about investors. All he had was a small grocery store he ran with my grandmother. But investors need facts and figures they can trust, and figures, so to speak, that they can trust without the liars. And I think Congress responded by passing Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, having had a ringside seat, and myself having a ringside seat with my home state Senator Paul Sarbanes of this historic legislation. I saw how Republicans and Democrats came together under ultimately President George W. Bush's administration, but Congressman Mike Oxley, Paul Sarbanes, really terrific back and forth with Mike Enzi and others in the Senate. And they understood all too well the importance of figures and the trust in those figures. And their vision led to reforms establishing the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board as an independent watchdog over the audits of public companies and their auditors. And while many people listening to this webcast might not know the PCAOB, it's an independently funded board that has about 900 employees as well, but an independently funded board under the oversight of the SEC. So we oversee this independent board and its 900 folks. And auditing firms must register with the PCAOB if they audit one of the approximately 7,000 actively reporting public companies or one of the about 3,300 broker-dealers. So that's where the PCAOB fits in, public companies and broker-dealers. And under that act, passed 22 years ago now, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the PCAOB must conduct inspections of such audit firms. So the big audit firms that you know of, and they have to go in at least once every 3 years. Last year, the PCAOB staff conducted more than 230 audit firm inspections. Now, each of these auditing firms, what the PCAOB does is they look at underlying engagements, over 900 engagements. And believe it or not, they do it internationally as well as domestically. They've done it in 37 jurisdictions around the globe. And that's because, again, if you're trusting the U.S. capital markets and you have overseas companies in our capital markets, they too the public needs the trust in that. And Congress said that those two also had to be inspected. Look, of the 945 staff at the PCOB, the majority, 520, are actually in the inspections division. That's its core. It does a lot of other important things, but that's its core, its largest group. I want to thank the board for the responsiveness to this commission's request as included in a passback letter. We send them a letter in the midst of this process. We ask some questions, we give them some guidance, and I want to thank the board for their responsiveness and adjusting their preliminary budget along the way of our passback letter. At today's meeting, or I should say, as today's meeting is nearing the end of this administration, I'd like to share some just quick reflections on the PCOB's work these last 4 years. I say first, for nearly 20 years, the Chinese authorities wouldn't let anybody from the US, PCOB, or anybody else really inspect or investigate the auditors of Chinese related companies listed here in the US markets. There were attempts, and many of my predecessors made their good faith efforts to move this along, and many of Erica Williams' predecessors made good faith efforts, but it wasn't happening. With the help of a 2020 law passed before I got here, but with the help of that law, the PCOB and we here at the SEC undertook serious negotiation with the Chinese authorities, which culminated in a statement of protocol signed in August of 2022. I'm pleased to report that for the last 3 years, since that was signed in 22, for 23, and here in 24, the PCOB has been able to fulfill its inspection and enforcement related responsibilities that relates to audit firms in China and Hong Kong. Of course, the Chinese authorities had a lot to do with this. The depth of our capital markets had a lot to do with it, that the Chinese authorities didn't want to lose access. But my compliments to the PCOB and the SEC staff, too many to name here, but who worked on this and got these accomplishments done. Second, for practical reasons, Sarbanes-Oxley actually permitted the newly established PCOB to carry over existing standards from the AICPA, a trade association, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, important group, but still a private sector group, and to carry them over on an interim basis, standards. When I started the SEC, though, there were still 42 of these so-called interim standards, 42 out of 49 that were first put in place, which were intended to be temporary. I'm pleased to note that the progress has been made in the past 3 years. The PCOB now has updated about half of these interim standards. There's still 20 or so that are interim from 22 years ago, but my compliments to everybody on the commission here and at this PCOB for their work. And then third, I have seen the passage of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act 22 years ago as important and really important to building trust in public companies, broker-dealers, and the figures, and ensuring that we can trust those figures. But I don't think we can take that trust for granted. I really just don't think we can take it for granted. Human nature is such that it needs rules in place and needs an eye, sort of an auditor on the auditor, or inspections on the auditors. The PCAOB is an important part of the reforms put in place 22 years ago, and I note again on a very bipartisan basis. I had a ringside seat on that. And it writes standards for the auditors and it audits the auditors. And I think that's the core of what it does. I think it's every bit as important now as it was 22 years ago. And I think it's every bit as important into the future as I reflect on, future administrations coming in. For their work on the matter, I'd like to thank the staff of the Office of the Chief Accountant here at the SEC, the Office of Financial Management, the General Counsel, Information Technology. Of course, thank those that are presenting today. You'll see a longer list on our website. I'll now turn it over to our Director of the Office of Chief Accountant, Paul Munter. After that, Paul will hand it to Karen Kaufman, who's our Chief Financial Officer at the SEC, will give a sense from her perspective on this. And then Erica Williams, who chairs the PCOB. After Paul, Karen, and Erica chat, we'll turn it to our commissioners. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair Gensler, and good morning, commissioners. It is a pleasure to be here with you today and to be joined by the SEC's Chief Financial Officer, Karen Kaufman, as well as PCOB Chair Erica Williams, as Chair Gensler noted. Karen and I will present the SEC staff's recommendation to approve the PCOB's proposed final budget and the accounting support fee for 2025. Staff from the Commission's Office of the Chief Accountant and Office of Financial Management, with the assistance of the Office of Information Technology, have conducted a thorough review of the PCOB's proposed 2025 budget and accounting support fee, and we've engaged extensively with the PCOB staff on these matters. We certainly appreciate the assistance and cooperation of the board and its staff as we have conducted our analysis and review. The review of the PCOB budget facilitates important and beneficial discussions between the SEC staff and the PCOB staff on critical matters and assists the Commission with its important statutory oversight of the PCOB and the stewardship of the publicly sourced accounting support fee funds. I am confident in the board's ability to continue to act as a diligent and responsible steward of publicly sourced accounting support fees, as evidenced by their accomplishments in this past year, which includes standard setting and rulemaking, as the chair mentioned, which resulted in the board approving 7 new standards and rules, inspecting over 230 registered public accounting firms, covering 930 issuer and broker-dealer audits, including inspections conducted on accounting firms and their audit engagements in mainland China and Hong Kong, such that by the end of 2024, the PCOB is on track to have inspected registered public accounting firms that audited 100% of the total market cap in China and Hong Kong. Being responsive to investor calls to increase transparency in inspection data and make it easier for stakeholders to understand and compare firms' inspection results. Focusing enforcement efforts on conduct that poses serious risk to investors and imposing important sanctions and remedies to drive improvements, and enhancing stakeholder outreach and support for smaller audit firms through its advisory groups, its public forums, and other means. I also want to express our appreciation for the significant efforts of the PCOB staff in support of the assessment of the operations and programs of the PCOB and the development of the current year budget and accounting support fee. The staff recommends the Commission requests that the PCOB continue its quarterly updates on recent activities, including strategic initiatives for the PCOB's key offices and divisions. Based on a thorough review of the proposed 2025 budget and accounting support fee, and informed by the Commission staff's close and collaborative engagement with the board and its staff, we recommend that the Commission approve the proposed 2025 budget and accounting support fee. I want to thank, of course, the staff of the SEC, including Natasha Guinan, Anita Doubt, Shaz Niazi, Greg Hilson, Mark Jacoby, Fariba Nasri, and Tata Pross from our office in the Office of the Chief Accountant, Karen Kaufman, Alan Bloom, Christina Morford, Nikki Puccio, and Crystal Willis from the Office of Financial Management, Bryant Morris, Peggy Kim, and Hillary Holman of the Office of General Counsel, and David Bottom, Greg Schultz, and Bobby Sharma from the Office of Information Technology, all of whom worked tirelessly on the review of the PCOB's 2025 budget and accounting support fee request. I would also like to especially thank the board members, Chair Williams, and the board staff for their leadership and cooperation with the SEC staff. And now let me hand it over to Karen Kaufman.
Thank you, Paul, Chair Gensler, and Commissioners. As Chair Gensler and Paul Munter noted, the Office of Financial Management and the Office of the Chief Accountant devoted considerable resources to determine whether the budget and accounting support fee were prepared in accordance with Section 109 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Since the PCAOB submitted its 2025 preliminary budget, our staff has met with the leaders of the PCAOB's divisions and offices. We also reviewed supplemental information and justifications for the amounts in the budget request. The PCAOB's 2025 budget request is for $399.7 million, an increase of approximately 3.9% compared to the 2024 budget of $384.7 million. This increase is primarily attributable to increases in personnel costs, accounting for nearly 3/4 of the budget. This 2025 budget would be covered by an accounting support fee of $374.9 million, of which about $346.1 million would be allocated to issuers, and about $28.8 million of which would be allocated to SEC-registered broker-dealers. I also share Paul's confidence in the board's ability to continue to act as a diligent and responsible steward of the accounting support fee. The board has taken great efforts to improve its internal operations by undertaking a number of initiatives to better standardize processes, integrate systems and data, automate manual tasks, and reduce redundancies, all leading to efficiencies so that employees can focus on core mission activities. The board also continued its efforts aimed at retaining current staff and attracting the best and brightest to the PCAOB. Based on our review of the PCAOB's proposed budget and accounting support fee for 2025, the staff recommends that the Commission vote to approve both. I would like to join Paul in thanking the PCAO board and its staff, as well as the SEC staff, for their hard work and close cooperation throughout this process. Now I would like to turn it over to the PCAOB's Chair Williams for a brief statement, after which Paul and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Paul. And good morning, Chair Gensler and Commissioners Purse, Crenshaw, Ueda, and Lazarga. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the PCAOB's 2025 budget for your consideration. I'm obligated to note that I'm here today in my capacity as chair of the PCAOB, and my comments do not necessarily reflect the views of other board members or PCAOB staff. I want to take a moment at the beginning of our time together today to acknowledge that this is likely my last meeting with both Chair Gensler and Commissioner Lazarga. And I want to thank you both not only for your support for the PCAOB, but for your decades of public service on behalf of investors. The 2025 budget is $399.7 million and funds 945 positions across the PCAOB, one less position that was assumed in the 2024 budget. It results in a projected accounting support fee, or ASF, of $374.9 million, comprised of $346.1 million for issuers and $28.8 million for broker-dealers. While the 2025 budget assumes a necessary increase in the ASF overall, we anticipate the smallest billable issuers will see no increase, while the median difference per bill for issuers will likely be only $100. The PCAOB's 2024 budget reflects the resources required to carry out our statutorily mandated responsibilities and protect investors in our U.S. markets by continuing to achieve our strategic goals. Our inspections program is one of the most important tools we have to protect investors, and more than half of our staff are in our Division of Registrations and Inspections. The 2025 budget will enable our 430 staff in the Firm Inspections Group to continue their outstanding work in conducting domestic and international inspections, including approximately 30 staff that will be executing inspections in mainland China or Hong Kong. By the end of 2024, our staff will have inspected 232 audit firms and more than 920 audits across domestic annual, domestic triannual, international, and broker-dealer audits, including 79 international inspections of firms and more than 220 audits, including audits of firms in mainland China and Hong Kong. We have also made significant improvements this year in issuing our inspection reports in a timelier manner. We published the 2023 reports for annually inspected firms in August of 2024, 6 months faster than last year, and nearly all of the reports for triennially inspected firms were published within 6 months of the completion of those inspections. In 2025, we will strive to continue to improve on these results to provide critical information to the public even faster, so they have the information they need to confidently participate in the markets. In 2024, we continue to use every tool available to us to drive audit quality, including publishing charts to our website to make it easier to understand and compare inspection results both across firms and over time. Under this board, we have also more than doubled the number of staff spotlights, which provide valuable insights into how to improve, including highlighting key risks and examples of good practices to follow. And we recently published the first 2 installments of Audit Focus, a new PCAOB publication series aimed at auditors who typically audit smaller public companies. This year, our inspectors are seeing significant improvements in the aggregate Part 1A deficiency rates from the largest firms, which we expect to be reflected in our inspection reports next year. Based on these results, it appears the work that I just described is bringing about positive change in audit quality. The resources reflected in this budget will provide our staff with the ability to continue their great work in this area. Moving to standard setting and rulemaking, this board has issued proposals or adopting releases to update 20 standard setting or rulemaking projects, including 4 proposals and 7 adopting releases this year alone, many of which had not been substantially updated in 2 decades. This board has taken more formal actions to modernize standards and rulemakings this year than any year since 2003 when the PCAOB was established. The 2025 budget provides the necessary resources for us to continue this important work and help firms prepare for the implementation of recently updated standards and rules, and we will continue to provide firms with published resources related to our new standards such as QC 1000 to help them update their methodologies and train their staff for upcoming changes. Although the responsibility for preparing for the upcoming changes falls on firms, we recognize the need for such resources and plan to issue additional materials in 2025. We also continue to strengthen our enforcement program to ensure accountability, promote deterrence, and protect investors. Our Division of Enforcement and Investigation staff continues to focus on cases with significant audit violations, failures to comply with auditor independence rules, and matters threatening the board's oversight activities, such as non-cooperation with PCAOB inspections and investigations, including 2 recent cases in China for repeated violations of PCAOB rules and standards. All of these violations put investors at risk. This budget provides us with the resources to continue to hold bad actors accountable on behalf of the investors we serve. Finally, we continue to be good stewards of the fees collected to fund the PCAOB by evaluating not only our oversight activities, but also our outreach to stakeholders, internal processes, and information technology capabilities. In 2024, we organized a nationwide series of in-person and virtual forums for auditors of smaller businesses and broker-dealers, with each event hosted by a different board member, which gave us a chance to hear from small firms directly about their unique needs and challenges. We also enhanced our outreach activities with investors by issuing 7 investor advisories and bulletins this year, which provide critical information to deepen investors' understanding of the PCAOB's work. Finally, I am proud to share that our internal surveys show significant increases in staff satisfaction under this board. More than 80% of PCAOB employees who participated in our most recent employee engagement survey said they would recommend the PCAOB as a great place to work, an increase of nearly 30 percentage points from our first survey. This budget enables us to both provide our staff with competitive compensation that acknowledges their extraordinary work on behalf of investors and retain them, as well as attract new expert talent to help us meet our investor protection mission. I would like to thank the commissioners and the staff of the Securities and Exchange Commission, including in the Office of the Chief Accountant, Paul Munter, Natasha Guinan, Anita Dowd, Shaz Niazi, and Taylor Pross, as well as in the Office of Financial Management, Karen Kaufman. I would also like to thank my fellow PCAOB board members and our dedicated PCAOB staff. I would now be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Erica, Karen, and Paul. Over to you, Commissioner Peirce.
Thank you, Chair Gensler. Welcome, Chair Williams. Thank you to Paul and Karen for your presentations as well. The PCAOB has a vital, though deliberately limited, core mission to protect the interests of investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports. The Commission has oversight authority over the board, which includes reviewing the budget and annual accounting support fee. Commission oversight is important. Issuers and broker-dealers bear the direct costs of funding the board, some of which get passed on to investors. And if the PCAOB fails to use its budgeted resources wisely, investors, the economy, and the audit profession pay indirectly in the form of impaired functioning of the capital markets. The PCAOB, as you've heard, is asking for nearly $400 million for 2025. While only a 4% increase from 2024, it is 40% higher than 2020's $285 million request. At this rate, the budget 5 years from now will be $560 million. The increase is striking, but even more important is whether the PCAOB is having a net positive effect on audit quality. Are the dollars the PCAOB is spending working? The PCAOB paints a picture that does not look a lot better than pre-PCAOB days. PCAOB staff reports that aggregate deficiency rates have continued to increase across all inspection programs, and 46% of the engagements reviewed in 2023 had at least one Part 1A deficiency, excluding broker-dealer and auditor inspections. At the firms that collectively audit approximately 80% of the market capitalization, aggregate Part 1A deficiencies held steady at 26% in 2023 after previously jumping from 12% in 2020 to 16% in 2021 and 26% in 2022. Chair Williams noted recently that restatements by public companies are at a 9-year high. 140 public companies issued restatements for the first 10 months of 2024, up from 122 in the same period last year and more than double the figure 4 years ago. The PCAOB's $35 million in fines this year reflect a 75% increase from last year, which was itself 80% higher than 2022's levels. The standard setting pace has also climbed. The board has taken more formal actions on standard setting and rulemaking this year than any year since 2003, when the PCAOB was established, according to the PCAOB. It's hard to know what to make of these numbers. Are the audit deficiencies uniformly serious, or is the PCAOB fixating on foot faults? Do they really compromise audit integrity? Is the increase in fines attributable entirely to real problems, or are some cases punishing imperfect form filing? Is overhauling the rulebook all at once necessary to address current problems, or would a slower pace of change be better for audit quality? The PCAOB's heavy-handed approach might look good at first glance, but a more nuanced approach is needed. Whatever one makes of these numbers, the PCAOB's trumpeting of them as evidence of the importance of its work is misguided, and its approach to audit oversight is destined to drive inspection deficiencies and enforcement fines even higher. A preferable approach relies on carefully implemented principles-based standards designed to afford room for auditors' professional judgment, the deployment of inspection staff to assist firms proactively in improving audit quality, and the use of enforcement only when serious violations have occurred. Audit oversight is difficult work. Getting it wrong risks transforming the audit profession from one where accounting professionals exercise informed independent judgment to interpret and apply principles-based standards into a mechanical exercise where risk-averse robotic auditors engage in a box-checking exercise focused on insulating themselves and their clients from liability based on the hindsight of regulators. Such a fundamental change would undermine the audit quality to the detriment of investors and the capital markets. A moderated course, as Board Member Ho has suggested, would achieve the PCAOB's goals more effectively than the path this budget sets. Despite my concerns, I commend the PCAOB for some of its initiatives, including its outreach events for auditors of small firms and broker-dealers, the shorter timeline on getting inspection reports published, its continuing work on China-based audits, and its Spotlight guidance series. Chair Williams, I do have a number of questions for you. Since 2020, the SEC's budget, which is subject to congressional appropriations, has increased by 21% compared to the PCAOB's 40% increase. How do you justify that disparity?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner, and for the opportunity to provide some clarity and context. So the PCAOB's SEC-approved budget in 2020 was $285 million. And the difference between the budget that we're seeking for 2025, the $399.7 million, the majority of that is due to inflation, which of course is out of our control. Over half of that increase is related to inflation. As we're all aware, in 2020 to 2021, inflation started to rise rapidly from an extremely low pace that it had been for the previous dozen or so years. The remaining half of that percentage relates to an increase in staff. 12% of that is an increase of the PCAOB staff from the staff that we had back in 2020. And over that time, our work has in fact increased. Most of the headcount increase has been in our Division of Registration and Inspections. And our goal over the past couple of years is to get the number of inspectors back in that division to the number that it was between 2013 and 2017 in our budgeted headcount. Over that time, we have increased the number of inspections that we have done by 40 firms and 150 audits that we've inspected. So the difference between 2020 and 2024 is 150 additional inspections. We do believe that we have to be extremely good stewards of the resource that we have. We also have, again, now ability to inspect and investigate in China. And each year we've sent 30 inspectors over to China to make sure that we are able to conduct those inspections. So the remaining additional small percentage is for us to provide a modest increase in compensation to our staff in order to be comparable to the private sector, self-regulatory accounting, and technological organizations as is required by Sarbanes-Oxley. And we have heard, and there have been many studies, that the number of accountants has been going down for the past decade. We are competing for that talent against audit firms. And we had originally, when I got here, had a lot of trouble attracting talent. And so our goal is to make sure that we are able to be competitive for that talent out in the workplace. But we are, again, very mindful of the fact that we need to be good stewards of the resources that we are collecting in order to move our mission forward. And that's the goal with our 2025 budget request.
No, I appreciate that answer. And I think certainly support having sufficient personnel to conduct inspections. I think that's important. Sounds from your employee satisfaction scores that you mentioned that you're not having trouble attracting folks to the PCAOB. But I do note that inflation has affected government agencies as well, and we, as I noted, did not have a similar kind of rise despite that inflation. So I think other government agencies that are subject to appropriations have had to do belt tightening to respond to the inflation. And so I think the PCAOB's budget increase really is notable. The 2025 budget requests around $34 million for consulting and professional fees, which is $3 million less than last year, but $18 million more than 2020. Last year, you explained that the increase, the expenditure would be a one-time investment. At least a portion of that expenditure would be a one-time investment that was necessary for improving the registration and inspections process. Do we expect those consulting fees to persist at these high levels, or should we expect that they will diminish over time?
Thank you for that question. So as you noted, our prior budget in 2024 did include consulting costs to enhance our registration and inspection system, which is mission critical for us. And those costs were part of a 2-year upfront technology investment. And this 2025 budget that we are requesting does reflect cost savings in that area, around $2.6 million or 7% less than last year's budget. We do expect that our strategic use of consultants will allow us to move forward with modern technology without increasing the number of permanent staff. And ultimately, our goal is to have the resulting business technology be able to help us drive efficiencies, and our use of AI and machine learning and other technologies will allow us to actually um, get those efficiencies without increasing headcount. And we've already seen some of that in action. So we have invested in a new tool to help us with our accounting support fee billing process. And through that automation, we've been able to reduce our reliance on two contractors that were helping us support us in our collection process. And that is the goal of our investment in technology going forward.
Okay, so what, should I expect those consulting fees to continue then in perpetuity, or are these one-time investments that will have longer term benefits to the board?
So no, you should not expect those to continue in perpetuity. As I noted, we have been scaling back our consulting, and that is the goal. We have consultants come on to help us implement this modern technology. Once those tools are implemented, we scale back the consultants and then also avoid bringing on additional permanent headcount. So we're driving efficiencies through our investment in technology, and we're using consultants to help us do that. But that is not something that will continue in the future. Once those tools are brought in-house, then we don't need those consultants anymore.
Okay, that's great. As board member Ho has suggested, the PCAOB should be held accountable for good stewardship and outcome-based performance. By what performance metrics should the PCAOB be judged? Should it be judged by deficiency in restatement rates, by enforcement statistics, or the number of standards promulgated? Or does some other metric better capture the PCAOB's contributions to audit quality?
And thank you for that question. I do believe that the PCAOB needs to be evaluated based on our protection of investors and how we're driving audit quality forward. I am pleased to note that the deficiency rates for the largest firms, as I mentioned, the aggregate rates for the Part 1A deficiencies, we are seeing coming down in 2024, which I do believe is a reflection of the good work that the PCAOB has done. This board came together in 2022 and passed a strategic plan, and we've been making efforts to forward every aspect of that plan for the protection of investors and also to drive audit quality forward. One of the first metric there that we are looking at, of course, is modernizing our standards, because outdated standards don't serve investors. And we have made significant progress on that. I'm proud that 75% of the standards that we voted on have been voted on unanimously by this board, and that we are now dedicating resources to make sure that firms can adequately implement them, because if they are implemented successfully, then investors are better protected. We also have, as you noted, been focused on inspections, and our inspections work has resulted in us being able to get inspections reports out more quickly, providing transparency to investors, firms, and other stakeholders. We also enhanced our ability on our website to compare inspection results. But moreover, we are focused on remediation, the process where we work with firms to assist them in implementing their quality control remediations, because a quality control system, which is the foundation of every audit, when improvements are made there, we expect in the future to see overall audit quality improve. And I do believe that we are seeing that with our 2024 results, which will be released next year. We also have been providing spotlights, audit-focused documents for smaller firms. We've been doing our forums for auditors of small firms and broker-dealers around the country, where we can hear directly from them and have them hear from us. And I do think that that has been driving improvements in quality as well. And finally, we've been focused on enforcement. We do focus on serious cases, and we have been bringing enforcement to bear on those serious violations, including violations in China, where we've recently deregistered a firm for violation of our rules, repeated violations. and for not cooperating with our investigators. And we'll continue to bring those important cases, which we're starting to see actual deterrence in those areas as well. So I don't think that there's one area where we can be looked at as far as success. I think you do have to look across the board, in addition to the operational efficiencies that we've been bringing to bear on the PCAOB's operations.
How do you think about measuring audit quality? What metrics do you look at for that?
So there are a variety of different ways that you can measure audit quality. And I've been out there saying that it's complex. We believe that Part 1A deficiency rates are a good measure because those are used to say, those deficiency rates, which are very serious, mean that the auditor did not perform sufficient appropriate audit evidence in order to sign their opinion, which to us means the audit work was not completed. And there's been some discussion recently about whether or not these are documentation errors or footfalls, and they very much are not. These are areas where if there was a misstatement in the financial statement, a material misstatement, we do not believe that the auditor completed sufficient work in order to be able to find that. And while there are many other categories of things such as restatements that people may use, we think that our Part 1A deficiency rate is a good measure.
Well, I think that part of I think this is, as you said, very complex because one could ask, are Part 1A deficiencies being looked at the same over time, or has the PCAOB changed the way it's looking at things? I mean, I think that one Part 1A deficiency is not like others, and so I think we have to be careful. But it's very unclear to me how we're supposed to assess audit quality, and therefore how we're supposed to assess the PCAOB's success. You're telling me we can look forward to lower Part 1A deficiencies next year on the big firms. I don't know that we're going to see the same results for small firms. And I think some of what the PCAOB has been doing has had a particularly hard effect, difficult consequences for smaller firms because they're so busy spending all their time thinking about complying with PCAOB rules that it's hard for them to focus on actually audit quality because they're worried about ticking the right boxes so that they don't have problems in their inspections. And I'm not sure that really does generate better audit quality. Do you have some of those same concerns that we could sort of inadvertently turn the audit profession into a box checking exercise that's not really showcasing the judgment which we expect auditors to have?
So I share your concern about small firms, and as does our staff, which is why we have put so many resources, and this budget will allow us to provide additional resources to drive audit quality forward with all firms, including small firms. I am not concerned about having our actions not result in firms continuing to use professional judgment and skepticism. One of the things that I mentioned that we've done this year with respect to small firms is that we have been very focused on working with them in the remediation process, where firms are given 12 months to improve their quality control deficiencies before they are made public. Our team spends an extraordinary amount of time working one-on-one with the firms to provide feedback to them as they endeavor to make those remediations and improve their quality control. We also this year held 4 in-person and virtual forums around the country that were geared specifically to small firms. And in those forums, we were able to share valuable resources and information to help the firms, but we were also able to hear directly from small firms about their unique needs and challenges. And we do plan, if this 2025 budget is approved, to continue those forums in 2025. We also have launched what I mentioned earlier, which was our Audit Focus series, which is a publication that's easy to digest information geared specifically to small firms and the challenges and practices that we have seen and the good practices that can implement, because we want to make sure that we are reaching them directly and providing the information that we need. And then we also very much consider small firms and their unique challenges when we are implementing new standards and rules. Our quality control standard, which was recently approved, is one good example of that. We don't believe that there's a one size fits all for protecting investors, and we think that each firm has unique risks. And this quality control standard allows each firm to identify their risks and then design a quality control system that is tailored to those specific risks. I also would just note that we are not seeing a decline in small firms registering with the PCAOB. In fact, in 2024, the number of firms in general has increased slightly from previous years. And at the same time, our withdrawals are not of firm registrations have not declined. So we have similar withdrawals that we've had in previous years, but we are going to continue to focus on small firms because they are a critical part of the audit infrastructure, and we want to make sure that we're providing them with the tools they need, and our 2025 budget would allow us to continue to do just that.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't support the quality control standard because I did have some concerns around how well that would really be able to be scaled and tailored, among other concerns about that. But so given the efforts that you've mentioned, and some of those, I mean, I've had a chance to watch snippets of those outreach events for smaller firm and broker dealer auditors. And I appreciate those events. I think they're important. And I appreciate especially that you mentioned that you're working with firms on remediation. I think that's an area that's very important for the board to spend time and resources. But are we seeing deficiency rates at smaller firms drop? And if not, what else do you need to do?
So we are very focused on improving audit quality across the board. Our 2024 rates have not yet been published. They will next year. And so I can't at this point get ahead of our staff on that with respect to small firms because those are still being processed. But we are focused on trying to make sure through all of the efforts that I mentioned that we're reaching small firms. Historically, our NAF, our firm inspection rates have been larger. There have been more deficiencies in those areas than at some of the larger firms. It's not across the board. There are, of course, some small firms that have very low deficiency rates, but in aggregate, they have been higher than your GNF, your big six firms. And that's why we put so many resources into making sure that we are trying to address deficiency rates at small firms and to drive improvements. And again, our 2025 budget will allow us to just continue those efforts even more.
You mentioned implementation rule standard and rule implementation efforts. How much of the 2025 budget is going toward implementation?
So making sure that firms can successfully implement our standards is not only good for protection of investors, but it's also good for driving audit quality. And that has been a real focus for us. I would have to get back to you on specifically how much money is going into our Office of Chief Auditor for that. But I will say that we have been very focused on our implementation of the standards that we have and guidance on implementation of the standards that have been approved under this board. We have already released 5 resources and tools to assist firms in complying with our QC 1000 standard. We also have put out a knowledge check test for AS 1000. We did a video series for our other auditor standard, and we also have additional implementation tools that we'll put out for our new confirmation standard, including a staff presentation that provides an overview of that standard. So we are dedicating significant resources in our Office of Chief Auditor to make sure that firms are successful as implementation dates draw closer. And we really do hope that firms take advantage of the tools and resources. We've also noted to the firms that we want to hear from them. We want to make sure that we are delivering the tools that they find useful. We have the ability for them not only to talk to us during our inspections, but we have a hotline and information on our website where firms can reach out directly to our Office of Chief Auditor to provide feedback, and we strongly encourage firms to do so.
How many calls did you get on that hotline last month or last year, or whatever time period you have?
I don't have that information right now, Commissioner, but I'm
I'd like
happy
you
to
to
follow
follow up
up.
with me on that. Yeah, please do.
Absolutely.
So I guess turning to a different question. One of the spotlight on staff priority for 2025 highlighted as one of the issues to be focused on is crypto assets, and it explains specifically that the staff plans to continue to focus on identifying public companies and broker dealers that have material crypto asset holdings and significant transactions related to crypto assets. And that was really it really stood out that crypto assets were highlighted. That was the only sort of specific kind of asset that was highlighted. In recent weeks, regulatory efforts to dissuade regulated entities from serving the crypto industry and its participants, or from otherwise engaging in crypto, have come to light. So how do you ensure that the PCAOB appropriately considers risk in selecting audits for inspection without dissuading auditors, issuers, or broker-dealers from engaging with crypto?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Um, we have had crypto assets or digital assets as a focus area for many years, including prior to this board. And one of the things that we do in order to decide our inspection priorities is that we work with our Office of Economic and Risk Analysis, which does provide information to our the Division of Registration and Inspections. And then we have a dedicated team that, based on our oversight activities of the more than 930 inspections that we have done and the 230 firms that we look at, and the years that we've been doing this work, we do think about, based on those activities, where we had seen higher deficiency rates, areas that we think that we need to focus on it. And some of those, there are, again, as you noted in our inspection highlights, in our inspection spotlight, we do have a number of different areas, areas where there are higher deficiencies, critical audit matters, areas where we felt like there had been issues with implementation of some of our standards. So there are a number of different areas of focus in addition to crypto assets. Many issuers don't actually, public companies don't actually have a significant number of crypto assets, but we have put out spotlights over the years and other information in response to some of our target team and focus areas here. But of course, our goal is not to drive anyone out of any particular market. Our goal is just to make sure that we're looking at those areas where we had seen higher deficiencies in the past.
But so how do you guard against some of the things that we've seen recently? You know, in recent weeks, there's been a lot of discussion in the media about this, about other regulators having problems of actually using their examinations process, for example, to dissuade people from engaging in this area at all. And so how do you guard against that at the PCAOB?
Sure. So I can't speak to what other regulators are doing, but as you know, our inspections are retroactive. So the auditors go in, they do the audit, and then we come in thereafter and inspect the auditor's work. So the work that we're doing, I think, given the fact that it's retroactive, is in no way dissuading people. And again, this has been an
Well, I'm
area
not
focus
sure
for
about
many,
that.
many years.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can rest in the fact that it's retroactive to say that it won't have an effect of dissuading, because if auditors see from year to year that audits that involve crypto are getting treated differently than other audits, they may decide not to engage in that kind of audit work at all. And so it can have an effect. And I urge you to bear that in mind as you discuss those issues internally. It's not to say, I mean, of course, the PCAOB needs to focus where there are risks, but it needs to do so mindful that the activities of an regulator, supervisor, can have unintended consequences, sometimes intended, sometimes unintended, of encouraging people to get out of particular areas. And so I just urge you to bear that in mind as you think about these issues, and talk about them internally at the PCAOB.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, we have put out a number of spotlights in this area, in no way dissuading anyone, but just providing good practices and observations that our teams have had as over the last few years. Not only, again, we are no way just focusing on crypto, but in all of the areas where we have special interest, again, based on the years of experience of our dedicated staff. And so it's not to dissuade, it is just only to help auditors improve.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just note that crypto assets are the only specific type of industry that's been singled out as, at least in the report that I looked at. I don't know if in the past other industries have been singled out.
They absolutely have.
So just turning to another issue around enforcement, there's been a lot of discussion in recent years at the PCAOB about enforcement statistics, and particularly talking about how the numbers have really increased. Do you worry that that kind of focus could have the effect of generating quantity over quality of enforcement actions? And what are you doing to guard against that?
And thank you for that question. We are very focused on making sure that we are using all the tools in our enforcement toolbox really to try to protect investors and to drive compliance. We don't view our penalties as a measure of success. We do look at every case and the facts and circumstances, and we apply the penalty that we think would assist in deterring wrongdoing. While we have had an increase in penalties, some of that is related to a number of factors. Last year, the majority of our penalty amounts related to us holding China-based firms accountable for violations like falsifying audits and failing to maintain independence, not cooperating with our investigations, sharing answers on tests. This year, we had one case that resulted in the majority of our penalties, a $25 million case against KPMG Netherlands for a 5-year cheating scandal that involved the head of insurance and highest levels of the firm, where they also provided misinformation to our investigators. So these are very serious cases, which we believe warranted serious penalties. But we are also very focused on other types of relief. That includes revoking firms' registration, which we recently did to a firm in China. We also have imposed independent monitors, and we've also required firms to change their supervisory structure. So we think that all of these tools are important when there are serious violations to make sure that investors are protected.
Do any of the enforcement actions, because one statistic I saw said something like 25% really weren't serious violations. They were more someone filled out a form wrong. So I think one thing that it might be worth your doing is thinking about whether emphasizing in the way the board has recently the number of enforcement actions is going to create incentives simply to generate higher numbers of enforcement actions without thinking about the substance and quality of those actions. Of course, there's a place for enforcement at the PCAOB. I think no one disagrees with that, as long as the PCAOB uses that in appropriate circumstances. I think one other issue that you mentioned, which we talked about some, but I just want to go back to it for a minute. You mentioned that there's a challenge for lots of people, including the PCAOB, to hire accountants in a situation where there's a shortage. And Board Member Ho expressed profound worry about the PCAOB's adverse effect on competition. Could the PCAOB itself be driving increased concentration and decreased competition in the audit space? How can you guard against that?
Thank you for that question. I completely agree that we have to bring more people into the field of accounting and that we need to expand the type of folks who believe that accounting is a path for them, because without them, we can't continue to improve audit quality and uphold the integrity of our markets and protect investors. Of course, the decline in the students majoring in accounting has been going on for over a decade, long before this board. The research, surveys, and other articles show that the largest contributing factor to that is the fact that the firms have not continued to keep pace with these salaries. They've lagged behind other areas like finance and IT. At the same time, accounting students are required to obtain 150 hours of education before becoming a licensed CPA, and the cost of school has increased. The PCAOB, for our part, has been doing what we can. And as you know, Congress, in its wisdom, when they set up the PCAOB, said that 100% of the penalties that we obtain in enforcement proceedings should go to scholarships for accounting students. Under this board, we've given out more scholarships than ever before. And we also increased this year the amount of the scholarship to $15,000. We, of course, do need to compete for talent, just as the firms do. Over half of our workforce does come from the firms. And so as such, we are trying to make sure with this budget that we're remaining competitive in our compensation and benefits, not only to attract new talent, but to retain this talent that we have.
Yeah, but I think the problem is bigger than just the PCAOB. I think the problem is that there's an industry that's becoming increasingly concentrated, and it's very hard for small public companies to find auditors that will serve them. And so I think that is something that the PCAOB needs to be taking into account. What are you doing to listen to the voice and the concerns of those small companies that have trouble finding a PCAOB auditor?
One of the things that this board has done is to make sure that we have reimagined our ability to do stakeholder outreach. We very much want to hear from small firms and have been doing so through our advisory groups and through our other stakeholder outreach that we've been conducting, making sure that we're hearing from those smaller firms who audit the smaller issuers is critical to our work. And we are going to continue to do that as we move forward to make sure that we have not only heard from them, but also from preparers who serve as the CFOs from those organizations.
I think that's great. I think it's really important to reach out and hear from the preparers, from the smaller issuers who are struggling to find an auditor, and thinking about those kinds of issues as you're writing standards and thinking about the effect that a standard could have on the competitive landscape, on the ability of new entrants to come in and serve these smaller public companies. I don't have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peirce. Commissioner Crenshaw.
Good morning. I'm happy today to support the PCAOB's budget. The budget is reasonably calibrated to help the PCAOB effect its mission of protecting investors and furthering the public interest in its regulation of public company and broker-dealer audit reports. That oversight creates market stability. First, it promotes transparency. Investors need this transparency to, among other things, evaluate companies' financial health and performance. Transparency alone, however, is not enough. The PCAOB's oversight function also creates reliability. Investors must be able to rely on financial information provided, to trust that it's fair and accurate. Together, this transparency and reliability create investor confidence. When investors have that confidence, investment decisions are made and capital flows to and among market participants. Today, we help ensure that the PCAOB can continue, at least for the next year, to guide, oversee, and help maintain the integrity of companies' financial disclosures. For example, the PCAOB oversees accounting firms that prepare audit reports for public companies, establishes audit standards for those firms, and, when appropriate, investigates and disciplines those who fall short of those standards. The PCAOB helps prevent fraud. This is an enormous task. The PCAOB oversees the process by which thousands of audits are performed every year. There are over 6,500 actively reporting public companies and over 3,300 broker-dealers that must be audited by a public accounting firm every year. And that just scratches the surface of what the PCAOB does. It takes a dedicated, highly specialized, and experienced workforce to carry out their mission. It naturally flows that the biggest expenditure in the PCAOB budget is its workforce, like so many other organizations. But the benefit here far exceeds the cost. The US capital markets represent approximately $120 trillion in value, and the PCAOB's budget is roughly $399 million. In other words, the cost of that investor faith and confidence is less than a penny on the dollar to issuers and the investing public. Moreover, you can fixate on a macro scale on inspection findings or the number of rulemakings or enforcement actions, but on the macro scale, the capital markets are flourishing. The stock market is near record levels, the number of small firms registering with the PCAOB has increased, and assets under management are near record levels, including for small asset managers. So to suggest that the PCAOB's work has hindered capital markets just isn't consistent with the facts on the ground. Rather, today's PCAOB is living up to its mission. They have engaged in rule and standard setting so that the audit profession is held to meaningful and modernized standards. The PCAOB has run a thorough process subject to public engagement, consensus building, and transparency. They've worked through arguments raised by litigious interest groups and lobbying organizations. In other words, they have represented the interest of the investing public and have deployed their budget effectively. The results are clear on their face. I am proud to support their work, and I have been for the past several years. Thank you to the PCAOB staff, to Erica and the board, to Paul Munter and the Office of the Chief Accountant here at the SEC, and to everyone else who helped get today's budget before us today. Thank you, and I hope everyone has happy holidays.
Thank you, Commissioner Crenshaw. Commissioner Ueda.
Well, thank you, Chair Gensler, and thank you, Chair Williams, for your presentation and discussion. At today's meeting on the PCAOB's 2025 budget, you might hear references to how the budget is increasing only 3.9% from last year, compared to the double-digit increases during the past 2 years. However, for this year-over-year comparison to be meaningful, the starting premise must be that the 2024 budget was reasonable and supportable. And as I stated last December, it was not. Another way to evaluate the budget is by comparing the PCAOB's mission and its $399.7 million request to the Commission's mission and budget. Assuming that the Commission's appropriation for the fiscal year 2025 will be the same as fiscal year 2024, the board's budget will be 18.6% of the Commission's appropriations. The PCAOB's mission is to regulate audits of public companies and SEC registered broker-dealers. According to the PCAOB, as of August 2024, there were 659 audit firms that had performed an engagement under PCAOB standards. In contrast, the Commission's tripartite mission calls for it to oversee trading in the equity and fixed income markets, disclosures by public companies, activities by approximately 40,000 entities, including more than 13,000 registered funds, more than 15,400 investment advisors, more than 3,400 broker-dealers, 24 national securities exchanges, 103 alternative trading systems, 10 credit rating agencies, 33 self-regulatory organizations, and 6 active registered clearing agencies, among other external entities. Without discounting the importance of high-quality audits, I question whether the PCAOB's resources should represent nearly 19% of the Commission's resources. Over the past 4 years, the scope of the two agencies' missions has not changed materially. However, in fiscal year 2021, the board's budget was only 15.2% of the Commission's appropriations. Why has the PCAOB's budget relative to the Commission's appropriations increased by over 22% during this period? Now, One might argue that perhaps the SEC has been underfunded, but this is Congress's determination. And the last I checked, it is Congress who is accountable to the voters and the public. Just as Congress expects the commission, when it sets our appropriations, to exercise fiscal discipline, the commission should also ask the board to do the same as part of its oversight responsibility. In addition to the size of the PCOB's budget, I also have concerns on how the money is being spent. Headcount for the 2025 budget is one fewer employee than the 2024 budget. Nonetheless, aggregate salaries are increasing by 13.9 million, which is the largest line item increase in the budget. I appreciate Chair Williams' notation that inflation has had real effects, and we have had record inflation in these last 4 years. These costs, though, are ultimately passed on to shareholders and customers, and I question the wisdom of continuing to pass on such costs without appropriate oversight by Congress. Given my concerns, I cannot support today's recommendation on the 2025 budget and accounting support fee. Nonetheless, I want to thank the members and staff of the PCOB for their work to carry out the PCOB's important mission in improving audit quality. For this year's budget process, I also want to thank Chair Williams and her staff for providing more detailed compensation information, which provided me with more complete information to evaluate the budget. I also want to recognize her efforts to find more efficiencies in the board's operations that were reflected through the passback process done by the SEC. I also want to echo what Chair Gensler said about, in looking back at what the PCOB has accomplished, is the inspections of audits conducted in China. The Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act was an important piece of legislation spearheaded by Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana and co-sponsored by Senator Kevin Cramer, Rick Scott, Tom Cotton, and Chris Van Hollen. I recall, I believe it was almost 10 years ago, I think it was January 2015, when the first, when I had a different role at the SEC, but the enforcement issues concerning the lack of audit inspections first came up to the executive staff of the SEC. It has been a long road. I'm really pleased that between the congressional legislation and the PCOB, that is now behind us. And finally, I want to thank the staff of the Commission's Office of the Chief Accountant and the Office of Financial Management for their efforts in the budget review process. So I just have a couple of questions for Chair Williams. First, I want to follow up on the concept of competition. You know, we at the Commission have a statutory obligation to consider competition in all of our rulemaking. What are some of the things that you think about in guiding the board, as well as how you think about the various proposals about how to foster competition within the audit and assurance profession among firms?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. We definitely think about competition and also the costs and benefits of each of our standards and rules, both in the proposal and adopting releases. We engage in serious economic analysis through our Office of Economic and Risk Analysis. On our website, we include the factors that our Office of Economic and Risk Analysis consider, but not dissimilar from the economic analysis that's done by the Commission. And we put that economic analysis out for public comment, not only through our proposal and adoptions, but also once adopted here in the public comment process that goes on at the Commission. We consider and carefully consider and read and weigh every comment that we receive, including comments to our economic analysis, to ensure that we are proposing and adopting standards and rules that will not drive out firms, but also include the considerations of competition. And as I noted in my responses to earlier questioning, we want to make sure through all of our work that we are reaching out to firms of all sizes We've reimagined our efforts for stakeholder engagement here at the PCAOB through our advisory groups, our investor advocate, and our stakeholder liaison work. We're constantly reaching out to, including small firms. As referenced, we did firm forums across the country this year. This budget would allow us to continue to do these small firm forums next year so that we can make sure that we are hearing directly from small firms, meeting them where they are, going to the jurisdictions where they are to make it easier for them to meet with us in person so that we can take into account all of the considerations that they have as we are moving forward with all of our mission-oriented work, standard setting, inspections, and enforcement.
Well, I think you and the other board members ought to be commended for the efforts on the small firm forums and the outreach efforts. I think that was a very good initiative by the board. It would be nice to see if there can be perhaps something, and maybe you've done it, I just haven't seen it, memorialization of some of the feedback that one heard from them. I think you're probably familiar with the small business forum we have here at the SEC, but at least it helps provide some thoughts as to what might be done to make things perhaps appropriately tailored or right scaled for smaller audit firms. Not all, audit firms are not all alike. I think they're big, and I think everyone recognizes that one size doesn't necessarily fit all. Do you think that might be something that the board would consider doing some sort of compilation at some point in the future of some of the recommendations or observations that it sees in these forums?
I think that is a wonderful suggestion, Commissioner. I'm happy to take that back because I think that making sure that we are providing that type of information to the market is important. I just want to be clear that we do believe that competition improves audit quality and that firms should compete on quality. And that includes firms of all sizes. And that's something that is a focus of ours. So thank you for that suggestion. I'm happy to follow up with your office on our efforts with regard to that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I don't have anything further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ueda. Commissioner Lizarga.
Thank you, Chair Gensler. In 2002, Congress enacted the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in response to the accounting scandals of that time. The law targeted the glaring deficiencies of a self-policing system of financial reporting rife with conflicts of interest. The large-scale accounting frauds this system produced inflicted substantial harm to investors and to our capital markets. Congress established the PCAOB, or the board, quote, to protect the interests of investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports, end quote. Like Chair Gensler, during my time in Congress, I too had a front row seat to the crafting and the enactment of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The final version of the law that passed the House of Representatives passed nearly unanimously and it passed the Senate unanimously. The board's budget is a vehicle for faithfully executing the law as intended by Congress. Investor confidence that all issuers are abiding by the highest standards of financial reporting depends on auditors fulfilling their duty as gatekeepers and being held accountable when they fall short of meeting their obligations. In carrying out its core mission as directed by Congress and in light of recent progress in improving audit quality, the board has convincingly demonstrated that it is up to the task. With a robust inspections record, both at home and abroad, and its successful efforts to speed up publication of its inspection reports, the board has leveraged its resources effectively. And it has made strides in other areas too. Inspection reports that are more accessible to investors and issuers, and additional guidance to auditors, particularly those auditing small public companies. The board has taken on core challenges that any financial regulator worth its salt must always take on. Modernizing outdated standards that have outlived their usefulness and holding wrongdoers accountable. The FY25 budget is a credible approach to honor the board's responsibility to protect investors and advance the public interest. The board made changes to the budget in response to the Commission's recommendations, including reductions in compensation costs and in travel expenses. I commend the board for carrying out its mission-critical functions with its limited resources while remaining efficient and nimble. To Board Chair Erica Williams, Thank you for your leadership and for your strategic approach to fulfilling the board's mission. And thank you for your kind words. It's been a pleasure to work with you and with all of the board's members in advancing a number of priorities that will protect investors and strengthen our capital markets. I'm pleased to support the final budget, and best wishes to everyone for a happy and restful holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all four commissioners. Commissioner Ueda, I thank you for referencing the work of Congress. And I do think that Senators Kennedy, Senator Van Hollen, the other senators that you mentioned, really gave us an important tool and frankly leverage. But it still was, remarkable staff at the PCOB and the SEC that came together to work on that. And so I thank you for mentioning that. On the funding, look, the SEC, I think, is underfunded. I will say that. I think for the remarkable role that we play in our capital markets, Commissioner Crenshaw mentioned a penny on the dollar. It's so much less than a penny on the dollar at the PCOB, but even our 2.1 billion that is spent a year. And it's the people's choice through their congressional representatives. Commissioner Ueda, I agree with you on that. But I can't miss an opportunity to say the 4,800 people at the SEC, we're just about the headcount we were in 2016. We have not grown since we shrank a little, we expanded a little, but all within 3-4% up and down. We've got a great agency here at the SEC, and we've got a remarkably important mission to the U.S. economy, to investors and issuers alike. But I do think that we don't have the appropriate funding here at the SEC. You gave me a chance, Commissioner Ueda, to say it, so I'm just building upon what you said, and Commissioner Crenshaw, about a penny on a dollar. I mean, my God, 120 trillion. We as an agency are less than a penny on a dollar, probably less than a penny on a penny on a penny on a dollar, like if I carry the zeros over enough on 120 trillion. But with regard to the PCOB, the matter in front of us today, I do want to thank Erica. I want to thank the other board members of the PCOB, Kara Stein, Tony Thompson, Christina Ho, George, the most recent board member, Bostic, for all of your work and your dedication to the mission of the PCOB with the oversight of the SEC. But with that, how do commissioners vote on the matter? I'm just checking to whether there's 2 votes or 1 vote. It's just 1 vote. So how did the commissioners vote to approve the staff recommendation on the budget and the accounting support fee?
I want to first echo your thanks to Chair Williams and the rest of the PCAOB board, their staff, the PCAOB staff, and the offices of Chief Accountant, Financial Management, General Counsel, and others at the commission who have worked on this budget. Unfortunately, my vote is no.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes, the ayes being 3-2, the recommendation is approved. And that concludes the meeting, but I do also want to wish everybody and their families and friends a happy holidays and into the new year. And may the new year bring you, wish you that which you wish. I know in this 5-member commission, we might wish different things, but that's part of democracy. And but I do wish everybody a happy holiday. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.